Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm breaking down a custom set of cards revolving around the Ant-Man movie. So this is just one video in a giant series of videos where I'm breaking down every single Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and turning all of their characters, items, and events into cards. So this is a bunch of characters, items, and events from Ant-Man. So there is not much you really need to know from the previous videos. You can go check those out, playlist in the upper right, but generally, here's how it works. Heroes are typically white, blue, and red, but Ant-Man is kind of a deviation where I'm adding green because it really makes sense within the context of the characters. And this isn't actually the first time that's happened, it also happened with Guardian, so you're going to start to see green being introduced within the heroes. Also, another thing to note that may be a little foreign is the type line. The type line currently doesn't say legendary creature human hero because hero is a new type added to the game by this set. Instead, it says legendary hero, and this is just to save space on the type line, because Thor would be a legendary creature, hero as guardian, god, noble, avenger, and so that's way too long. So legendary hero equals legendary creature hero, and the same is true of villains. So, if you want to see a full list of all the cards from Ant-Man, there'll be a link in the description down below. I'm not going to be able to talk about every single card, and if you want to see all the other films, there'll be a link in the description down below for that as well. So, why don't we jump right into this? Our first card is Ant-Man. So, he's kind of what the whole set of cards is revolved around. So he is a 4-cost green, blue, red, legendary hero, human thief. Thief is a new creature type added by this set of cards. He's a 4/4, and he says as long as he has tiny, he gets +0/+5, and as long as he has giant, he gets +5/+0. And then you can pay 2, and he loses giant and tiny, and then he gains either giant or tiny. So giant and tiny are two new mechanics for the set. Think of them kind of like vigilance in the fact that they kind of just add new things to the character. It's not an activated ability, and I'm going to get over talk about what they do here in a second. But basically what he can do is he can switch between being giant and tiny, which on face value, if those abilities did nothing else, he could become a 9/4 or a 4/9, which is pretty powerful. And giant and tiny don't do nothing. So why don't we break down what those do by looking at a very simple card, that being Shrink. Shrink is a 1-cost blue instant. It says target creature gains tiny until end of turn, but it also has this nice reminder text on it that says tiny means this permanent can only block and be blocked by other creatures with tiny, vigilance, or by walls. And then spells that target this permanent cost 2 more to cast. So basically it's messing with what can block it, and it really makes a lot of sense because if you're small, you're only be able to block by creatures that are really small, very vigilant, or by walls. So yeah. It also, you have a harder time blocking things, and then also, because you're so small, it's harder to hit you with things, you do have to pay more mana to cast things. Now, Giant is another card, or another mechanic within the set, and so Grow is a 1-cost green instant, and it says, target creature gains Giant until end of turn, and Giant says this creature can only be blocked by 3 or more creatures, and can block creatures with flying, so it's kind of like Reach mixed with Mega Menace, and then it says spells that target this permanent cost 1 less to cast, so that includes bad effects by your opponent. So if they're going to cast a murder on your creature, it's actually only going to cost them 2 because they're a bigger target, they're easier to hit. There are other versions of Grow and Shrink. For instance, Grow and Shrink Disc, Shrink and Grow Object, and Size Change are all different ways to give Shrink and Grow, because Shrink and Grow, or Giant and Tiny, can be given to other permanents for their ability to reduce the cost of spells. So like you could give an artifact Tiny and it would be harder to kill that artifact. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, I do want to jump into more characters, because those are kind of what's interesting. We have Hank Pym, who's a 6-cost legendary creature, human scientist, 2/2, and it colors. And it says, whenever a creature with tiny or giant enters the battlefield, or a creature gains tiny or giant for the first time each turn, draw a card. So, Ant-Man can pay 2 mana and gain tiny or giant, which will then make Hank Pym draw a card. So, you basically, if you have Hank Pym and Ant-Man out, you get this really cool value engine. And you know how you can make this value engine even better? We have Hope Van Dyne. Whenever she's a 5-cost 3/3 legendary creature human scientist, whenever a creature entering the battlefield or gaining an ability, which, you know, is exactly how Hank Pym is activated, causes an ability of another scientist to trigger, copy that ability, you may choose new targets for the copy. So basically, say a creature enters the battlefield with Tiny. You're going to draw a card from Hank Pym, and then she's going to be like, hey, something entering the battlefield caused an ability to happen, copy it. So now you're going to draw 2 cards. And so now if you have Hope Van Dyne, Hank Pym, and Ant-Man on the field, you can basically pay 2 every single turn to draw 2 cards. Now that does require you to have 3 specific creatures out on the battlefield, and none of them can be removed, so it is kind of a, big combo, but it's definitely an interesting one. She also synergizes with a bunch of other scientists throughout the set. Speaking of other scientists, we have Darren Cross and Yellow Jacket. Darren Cross is a legendary villain human scientist. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Darren Cross has 3 or more victory counters on it, transform it into Yellow Jacket. So we're seeing victory counters. These were also seen on Ronin and Red Skull, as just other character cards that do it, and basically you can pay 3 and tap, and until end of turn, target artifact you control becomes a copy of target artifact you don't control. Put a victory counter on Darren Cross. So if your opponent doesn't control an artifact, you actually can't transform him, so that does make it very difficult to transform, and because of that, it also would take 4 turns for this to activate. You then end up with a very powerful card with Yellow Jacket, who's a 5/5 with reach and hexproof, and as long as he has Tiny, he gets +5/+5, has Death Touch, and is an artifact in addition to its other types. So he has hexproof, so a lot of removal isn't going to work on him. And if you can pay 1 each turn, he's a 10/10 reach Death Touch hexproofer, which is very powerful. He also is an artifact because artifact count is important, and he fits perfectly within the villain colors, which is blue, black, and red. So next, why don't we move into the Thieves? We have Lewis, who here is a 2 black, black, red, red, so you can't actually play him in the hero deck because it does have that black in there. It's a legendary creature, human thief, and whenever you gain control of a permanent you don't own, put a +1/+1 counter on each thief you control. So he is really just going to be like the commander of a thief deck, and then you can pay 3 and tap and gain control of target creature. Its owner gains control of it. So think of it like a flicker effect. So you're going to gain control of something, and it's immediately going to go back to its owner, which can be used, like if you're playing against a blue deck that likes to steal things, you can use it to, hey, I'm stealing that, and then it actually goes back to its owner's control, which is actually me. So it does have some interesting things here. It also basically just reads pay 3 as long as your opponent controls a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each thief you control. So it's a very powerful card. It also fits perfectly within red black's ability to steal things, because that's kind of a sub theme within the set, is red black is going to steal your opponent's stuff, at least temporarily, and gain bonuses from it. We also have Kurt, who is a 3/3 for 5 with Flash, and when Kurt enters the battlefield, gain control of target artifact or spell until end of turn, untap it, it gains haste. So you can untap your spells, but basically it lets you just gain control of the spell. So if someone says you take an extra turn after this, Kurt can just be like, nope, that spell's mine, which may be a slight bend for red, but it can change targets, and this is just an advanced form of changing targets. And then sacrifice an artifact you don't own, change the targets of target spell or ability. So he's kind of like the hacker of the group, and so he's like manipulating things behind the scenes, and so he can just come out of nowhere and just mess you up. Then we have like Dave, who is a 5/1 with Defender for 4, and it says whenever a vehicle is crewed by Dave, it gains haste and first strike until end of turn. This is very clearly meant to go in a vehicle heavy deck, as he can crew anything with crew 5 or lower, and he normally can't attack, so you might as well tap him to crew a vehicle, and you're going to give your vehicles haste and first strike. So very, very powerful card if you're running it with vehicles. Then why don't we get into ants? These ones I'm not going to talk about too much just because they're not that interesting, but we do have a legendary ant, that being Anthony. It's a green legendary creature ant 2/2 with Tiny, and ants you control get +1/+1, so it's a Lord card for ants. And then you can pay 3 and tap and look at the top 3 cards of your library. You reveal a land or ant card from among them and put it into your hand. So a repeatable kind of card advantage trigger in an ant deck is very powerful. And there are a decent amount of ants. We have things like Giant, which is an ant with Giant. We have Ant Flyer, Ant Warrior, Bullet Ant, Carpenter Ant, Fire Ant, Crazy Ant, and Ant Soldier, which are all just cool ants that will synergize with all of these ants. There are also a couple cards that care about ants, that being Control Ants, which is an enchantment that basically just lets you search your library for an ant card, and it's going to boost all your ants like crazy, kind of like a hive mind-esque effect. So if you have 2 ants, each of them are get +2/+2. If you have 3 ants, each of them are getting +3/+3. So they get exponentially larger. And so that's really it for this. Now, a lot of my other videos are a lot longer, but Ant-Man is kind of just a simple movie. It doesn't have the high tension and the high amount of characters that things like Avengers movies have, but there are some very fun cards. And so what you're probably seeing now is a bunch of cards that are just scrolling by the screen. And these are just some of my favorite cards within the set that I didn't get to talk about, but are very cool, and you should probably check them out. If you want to see every single card, check the description. There will be a link to just specifically the Ant-Man page and a link to the whole Magic the Marveling website, where you can check out individual movies. You can see every single card from every single movie in one list. You can check out the themes within the entire set. So there's a lot of cool stuff down there. You guys should check that out. It's a new website. It's been updated a ton. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this video. If you guys have any suggestions for changes, if you notice something is misworded, something doesn't fit within its colors, just let me know in the comments down below. If you have ideas for new cards, let me know those as well, and leave me feedback in the comments down below. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button, subscribe, and feel free to check out all of the other videos in this series. At this point, there's a ton of them, and they're all really, really fun. So, see you guys in the next one.